He is a videographer, and he videos police officers in action doing their job, doing their work. In fact, sometimes he just videos them when they're pulling him over, for example. And now, he claims there's a target on his back from law enforcement for what he's done. And Christopher Ruff joins us right now on the show. Christopher, I do appreciate you being here.
I watched the YouTube channel Direct D do an interview on a Las Vegas radio show recently. Thought he did a great job. I just thought there was a couple things I might have wanted to, if I were doing the interview, I would have elaborated more on or said differently. So let's go through it and pick out a few parts of the interview.
Listen, I'll be honest with you. If I'm stopped at a DUI checkpoint, I have no problem with police officers asking me questions because I got nothing to hide, right? So if they want, have you been drinking, sir? No. Thank you for what you're doing, officer, and I move on. But officers on the other side of things need to understand that if there's no reasonable suspicion, right, Chris, you talk about this all the time, reasonable and articulable suspicion that you have committed a crime, number one, they can ask you for ID, but you don't have to give it to them. That's not against the law. And I just feel like there's so many people out there, right, Chris, that don't understand their rights.
Right. I mean, and that's part of the reason why we encourage people to exercise their rights. Like you say, I'm not doing anything wrong. Why wouldn't I just tell them I'm not drinking? It's because when you comply so easily, just because you're not doing anything wrong, you make it more difficult for the next guy that really doesn't want to have a conversation with him. He just tells him, I'm not, or just doesn't talk to him at the DUI stop, keeps his window rolled up, doesn't say anything to him, and just sits there. Because they can't do anything. Technically, they're not even supposed to be stopping you while you're traveling. That's a detainment.
Yeah.
I have seen officers arrest people that were sober. So I've seen it over and almost every week that I've gone out and recorded the police, I have seen them arrest people that are sober because there's a reward system for arresting people that are drunk. It's called MAD. There's a MAD point system. You get these certificates as an officer, and it gives you good credit when you go try to advance in rank or get a different job somewhere else in the country. So if you answer, no, I'm not drinking. Well, where are you coming from? Oh, I'm coming from my mom's house, or this. It's a series of questions that they're going to continue to ask you to eventually get you out of the car. I mean, if you stutter a little bit when you answer one of their questions because you're nervous, oh, that's a trigger for them. Now their eyes are going to get all big and they're going to ask you something else. And then it's going to be like, sir, step out of the vehicle for me. And you're going to be like, well, why? Or just do it. And then they're going to ask you to do a DUI test. You're sober, but you shouldn't You should never have answered the question from the start, and you wouldn't be out of your car doing a DUI test.
As far as why you don't answer questions at a DUI stop, as Direct D pointed out, the stop itself, they're not even supposed to be stopping you while you're traveling freely within the borders of the United States of America. It's unconstitutional. I know the Supreme Court wrote down on a piece of paper that they think it's okay and that it's a constitutional loophole. Those are all great points, but I would argue the reason you don't say anything, it's the point of the matter, right? The old saying, you stand for something or you'll fall for anything. We shouldn't answer questions because we shouldn't have to. That is the point. And, some people may think it's silly. I'll go ahead and just comply with their violation of my privacy and my right to travel. But in my opinion, you have to stand up for your rights, or that's how they get taken away.
You alluded to this a little bit earlier. Would you agree with me, though? We know that there are bad cops out there. We know that. You've come across some of them, unfortunately. But would you agree with me that most cops, I don't know if you could put a percentage on it, but most cops, I'd like to think, are reasonable people. They're heroes. They serve and protect. Is that a fair? Would you agree with me on that most cops are not bad cops?
No, 90% of them are bad cops.
Really? You really
5% of the sworn police officers work in police stations. The other 5% are good cops. 90% of them are not good. There's 5% that work in the police stations that don't necessarily have interactions with the public. They're not at scenes. They're all right. And then the 5% that just do their job. I mean, you have to understand police culture. It is literally cliques and gangs, just like high school. The supervisors, the training officers are not teaching them how to enforce the law. They're teaching them how to do things their way. So, I mean, every police stop that I've been at, except for maybe a handful that I've put up on my channel, there's something wrong with it. There is something wrong going on, whether it's what they're doing to me or what they're doing to the people there. And then when they're doing stuff that's wrong, and it's so obvious that a 3-year-old could tell, the other ones that are just standing around that might have been good guys that didn't intervene, They all become part of the not good cop group.
What do you
see right here? When DirectD is given the 90% figure, I like that better than most people's answers, but I tend to go a little bit further. I see what he's saying in that the 5% of officers that are stuck behind a desk and just doing paperwork and they don't have any interactions with the public, you could technically consider those good cops because they're not out there doing things, violating people's rights and interacting with the public in that way. However, my thought is I hesitate to call those 5% good cops because of the fact that if they were moved from their desk position and put out into the public, they would quickly assimilate into the order following regular schedule of rights violations that is the police department.
This might not be applicable to every police department around the country because there's small town police departments and sheriffs that this might not apply to. But as far as Arizona goes, in my experience with Arizona specifically, 1000%, that's what I believe.
And well, that's a lot. If you believe that 90% of cops are 90%. Bad cops, that's really bad. I hope that's not true. Yeah. I'm not saying that's very high.
I think Brian isn't the only one that feels this way. It's difficult for people to admit that 90% of cops are bad, because if you do admit that, if you're prepared to admit that, then you should feel some sense of urgency that something needs done about that. And so it's easier just to kind of hope that that's not really the case. But in my opinion, you should feel some sense of urgency to do something. You and everyone else watching this, everyone that you share this with, should feel compelled to do something. Maybe that's just posting on your social media feeds, questioning things. You don't have to put opinions on there. You can just ask questions. That's the whole point, is questioning authority. When you see something that doesn't make sense, make a post about it and voice your opinion about why it doesn't make sense and ask questions so that your friends and family and people on your friends list can start a conversation about those things. Because that's what needs done, is we need to start having these conversations. I know religion and politics are like, you're not supposed to talk about those because it makes people uncomfortable, but these are the uncomfortable conversations we need to have, and we need to feel a sense of urgency to have these conversations.
I don't condone anybody just randomly going up to cops and flipping them off. I don't condone anybody just swearing at cops randomly, which I'm not saying you're doing, even though that's not against the law, by the way. I don't condone that behavior, but I also don't condone a police officer arresting somebody or harassing somebody because of their, First Amendment rights, not breaking any laws either.
For the most part, I don't agree with somebody just walking up and mouthing off for no reason. I mean, there's some people that just hate the police and there's nothing that's going to change their mind. And that's what you're going to get from them. But flipping them off is different. I mean, it's an expressive gesture that, I mean, yeah, it's not kosher, it's not politically correct, and it's not nice, but I do it just, and I don't have it's not like I don't like the police. I'm just, it's a test. It's a test for me. If you do or say anything because I flipped you off, you're proving my point.
It's not like the only bad cops are the ones that do something illegal. I'm saying that the legal things, the legal procedures and practices that officers go through and adhere to every single day violate our rights. I don't hate all officers as human beings. I hate their unquestioning loyalty to the broken system. I hate that they don't question their own authority. They don't question anything, really. They follow orders, and we've heard time and time again from officers everywhere, no matter what conversation you're having with them, they'll boil down to, well, if it's a law on the books, then I'm going to enforce it. And of course, we all know they have officer discretion, so they're not going to enforce everything on everyone all the time. They're going to pick and choose who they enforce it on. They might only enforce a bad law on certain types of people, which actually makes it worse, discrimination. But the point is, they are going to enforce bad laws, period. Every officer I've ever come across personally, at the end of the day, will follow those orders and will enforce bad laws on who they choose to enforce those bad laws on.